Discontent grows for women at Wells Fargo by Emily Glazer. Wall Street Journal, September 1st and 2nd, Saturday and Sunday. About a dozen female executives in Wells Fargo & Company's Wealth Management Division gathered in Scottsdale, Arizona in June after an internal conference. They had had enough. Women should be at home taking care of their children, some of the executives said they had been told over the years by Jay Welker, president of Wells Fargo's private bank and head of the Wealth Management Division since 2003. Qualified women recently had been turned down for several top roles that went to male applicants. When the women raised concerns, they felt ignored. Their frustration culminated in the, quote, meeting of 12, unquote, according to a half dozen women who are Wells Fargo executives and who attended the meeting or had direct knowledge of it. The meeting represented most of the 12 regional directors in wealth management out of 45 who are women. Above them, all 7 senior management directors overseeing regions are men. There are other senior wealth management roles held by women, but they hold positions that, because they don't run a line of business or oversee profits and losses, lack the same prestige and responsibility that comes with making money for the bank. Page turn. The June meeting wasn't the only sign of discontent among women there. Wells Fargo is investigating complaints of gender bias in its wealth management division. For months, stretching back to before the meeting, the bank has interviewed dozens of women as part of the investigation, according to the executives. Some of the executives said part of the investigation focuses on at least one formal human resources complaint against Mr. Welker over gender bias. Some of the executives said Mr. Welker often called women girls or told them to put their big girl panties on. The investigation in the Wealth Management Division and the complaint against Mr. Welker hadn't been previously reported. Mr. Welker didn't respond to requests to comment. Wells Fargo is, quote, committed to promoting diversity, including in all aspects of our business, unquote, said bank spokesman Kathleen Leary. She declined to comment on Mr. Welker's behalf. We value all of our Wells Fargo team members, and we take seriously any allegations raised by a team member or against a team member, she said. We ensure that concerns raised are thoroughly and objectively investigated while taking measures to protect confidentiality. Once an investigation is complete, we are committed to taking any appropriate action. The meeting of 12 and the internal investigation shows how the Me Too movement, which has shaken up Hollywood, politics, and business, is spilling into broader discussions about whether women are being fairly promoted into senior roles where they can influence an organization's culture. The conversation is particularly acute in industries like wealth management that have been long dominated by men. Though the female Wells Fargo executives haven't alleged sexual harassment, some said the broader movement against harassment has influenced them to speak up. The move to address bias comes to Wells Fargo The moves to address bias come as Wells Fargo has fallen from a position as an industry star and is struggling to right its business models and mores. Since the sales practice scandal erupted 2 years ago, the bank's reputation has been repeatedly punctured by investigations across its major business units. Wells Fargo's Wealth and Investment Management Unit, which includes the Wealth Management Division, was already in tumult before the gender bias investigation. Whistleblowers have alleged that financial advisors there push clients into products or investment platforms intended to generate more revenue for the bank and bigger bonuses for employees rather than the best return for customers, and the Justice Department, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Labor Department are investigating. The bank is also restructuring parts of the unit, and those plans are expected to result in job losses, people familiar with the plan said. Wells Fargo has around 14,200 total advisors, though the majority are in its retail brokerage business. The bank doesn't break out financial metrics for its wealth management division, but the wealth and investment management unit brings in around 8% of overall bank profits, or $445 million in the second part of 2018. About 3 years ago, 5 regional managing directors in wealth management were women. The numbers rose to 12, and out of 45 current regional managers, directing under Tim Trout, who was head of regional wealth management, according to a person familiar with the matter. A few years ago, the bank combined the roles of regional director and regional managing director, which accounts for much of the increase in the number of female regional managing directors, the person said. In an interaction this spring that some saw as emblematic of gender bias at the bank, senior managing director Greg Carr introduced 3 veterans on stage at an event and shook the hands of the 2 men but not the woman, according to executives who attended. Mr. Carr, also a veteran, later told people he had run out of time, according to executives. Complaints reached Mr. Carr's boss, Mr. Trout, who reprimanded him, according to the people. Weeks later, Mr. Carr appeared again with the veterans and shook the hands of all 3. Joni Marquez, the woman who was introduced at both events, said she didn't recall whether or not Mr. Carr shook her hand and doesn't remember feeling offended. Ms. Leary declined to comment on behalf of Mr. Carr and Trout, who also didn't respond to requests to comment. An email chain among some of the female wealth management executives kicked off earlier in the spring, eventually leading to the June meeting of 12. A prime topic was the lack of women in senior roles. In a historically male-dominated industry, Wells Fargo still has fewer top positions occupied by women compared with wealth management peers. Before the Scottsdale conference, the women executives told management they planned to hold a meeting about how to break the glass ceiling and asked for support. Human resources executives at the bank at first said at least one female executive not affiliated with the gathering would have to moderate. The 2 sides reached a compromise by agreeing that a female executive would call in at the beginning of the meeting to explain diversity and inclusion tools and training already happening inside Wells Fargo. Once the official conference ended, the women met nearly all day and the next morning and discussed plans for identifying, training, and mentoring other women to prepare them for senior roles. They said they wanted to be sure that when jobs open up, men won't be the only options. They delivered those recommendations to Mr. Welker and Mr. Trout about a month ago. Mr. Trout followed up with some of the women about 2 weeks ago, acknowledging their feedback and detailing next steps, a person familiar with the matter said. Now the bank is pushing to hold 5 women-focused wealth management internal events before year's end in New York, Arizona, Colorado, California, and Florida. This is up from 2 women-focused wealth management events last year and 1 the year before.